Hello everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I really hope you're all doing okay and having a great day and an amazing week. My name is Effie and today is Thursday and it is day 4 of palette week. The palette we are focusing on in today's video is the PLOUISE Watch the Queen Conquer. There you go, you can see it now. Watch the Queen Conquer palette. Now this is a bit of an interesting palette. If you open it on this side, you have a bunch of pinks and peaches and purples. And if you open it on this side, you have a bunch of reds, orange, greens, yellow, greens, kind of greens. And in the middle, there's a chessboard, which is exactly what you want in an eyeshadow palette. So while I use this palette to create this look on my face, I will also be discussing my eyeshadow palette wish list. I did do a video like this last year, it was around May time last year, and basically the premise is, if money is no object, which I realise is a daft thing to be saying given the economy right now, but if money was no object, which palettes would I go out and buy? I will also be looking back on last year's video and letting you know if I've bought any of the palettes off last year's wish list, if there's any palettes that are still on the wish list this year, and things like that. So if that sounds interesting to you, then please do just keep on watching. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. If you like my content, please consider subscribing. I normally put up 2 videos a week and it's all makeup content, but this week you are getting 5 videos plus your standard Saturday videos, so really 6. So if you don't want to miss any of them, then please do just hit the subscribe button, and you can always go back on my channel and watch the ones that you've missed from this week if you're interested. But other than that, I'll let you enjoy the video. So I thought a good place to start this video would just be to go through my last video, which I spoke about eyeshadow palette wish listing, which was in May. I will leave it in the clickable I button. I'll also try and remember to leave it linked in the description box. But basically I went back and re-watched that video and I made a note of all the palettes that I have bought since that video that were on the list, and all the palettes that I haven't bought but they're still kind of on the list. And I will say my opinions have changed quite a lot since that video. And I think I did also mention in that video that there were some palettes that were on the list purely just because I wanted to test them, not because I really wanted them, and there were some palettes that weren't on the list but I'd probably end up picking up in order to test the brand. That still kind of stands. There's a lot of palettes that won't be mentioned here that I will end up buying just to test them because that's the whole point of this channel. And then there's some palettes that I sometimes just think I'd like to test them to see if they're any good, but I'm not that fussed about them. I have tried not to put too many of them on the list this year because it's not very useful, you know. I want to tell you what I want, what's interesting me. So we're going to start with the purpley pink side. I'm not going to bother telling you what shades I'm using because there's going to be a lot of them. But yeah, you'll be able to see what I'm doing. I'm just going to do standard Effie look. It's going to be the same on both eyes, just with different colours. So let's talk about what palettes were on the list last year that I have since picked up. Like I said, I did this video in May of last year, so it has been well over a year since I did that video. From my count, there's about 44-45 palettes in that video. I obviously haven't bought them all, and there are some that I'm no longer interested in. But palettes that I have bought, we'll start with the Beauty Bay Fiery 2.0 palette. I have probably already put the haul video up, but in case I haven't because I've been lazy, I did a massive Beauty Bay order, and as part of that, because I spent over a certain amount, I did get a free gift, and it was the Fiery 2.0 £42 palette that they have. But that was on my wish list last year. I haven't played with it yet, and I'm not sure if I'm actually going to have any time this year to play with it, but if I do, you'll obviously see a video on it. But it's just such a pretty palette. It's like kind of neutrally in that it has browns in there, but it's got a lot of reds and oranges and yellows. And I will say, last year I liked red eyeshadow a lot more than I do now. I don't dislike red eyeshadow, I still think it looks nice on me. It's just sometimes a bit much for me to wear, you know, to the office and things like that. But I do still like how it looks on me, it's just not what I go for all the time anymore. But I'm still excited by that palette because it still has browns, it still has oranges, it still has yellows. And realistically, when I did my most recent declutter, I did get rid of pretty much all of my red eyeshadows. So having the Fiery 2.0 palette now is probably going to be a good thing. Another palette that I picked up was the Makeup Obsession x Tiffany Kaleidoscopic Dreams palette. I think I picked this up pretty soon after the video went up last year because I've had it for a while now. I'm really happy with my purchase. I actually really enjoy the palette. I don't reach for it that often. I have reached for it a couple of times recently because I've been trying to do more Instagram posts with different palettes. But yeah, I do love it. There's only, I think, 8 shimmers in the entire palette and they're not my favourite, but the mattes work really well. It does have a silver shimmer that is the best silver shimmer I have in my collection, and yeah, the others just don't really interest me, but it is a really good palette. It has really good matte shades. It's an amazing formula. It's pigmented, it blends really nicely. I keep hearing that it's either discontinued or going to be discontinued, but I don't think it is. I'm pretty sure it's still on the Revolution website and you can still get it. Next we have an interesting one because it was on my list and I did end up receiving it, but I didn't keep it, which is an odd one. And it's the Beauty Bay Bright palette. The 42 pan version. I have the Bright mattes and I adore it. But I thought that I really wanted to get the Bright palette because a friend on Instagram had told me that it was really, really good. And I do believe her. I didn't test the palette, but it came in one of the Beauty Bay mystery boxes. And I put it in a giveaway pretty much straight away. I decided there and then that I didn't want it, even though it had been on my wish list. And I'd said that I wanted it. When it was actually in my hands, it turns out I didn't want it that badly. And it went into my 250 subscriber giveaway. So yeah, I just thought somebody else would get more use out of it. I love my Bright mattes. It's one of my favourite palettes I've ever owned. But I just didn't need the Bright as well. And I thought somebody else would get a lot more use out of it. Another not so straightforward one is that last year I looked at the Stacey Marie Be Perfect Carnival palette. I will say when I did the video, the Antidote palette wasn't out yet, so I basically picked one of her palettes and said, yeah, that's probably the one I would go for. And the funny thing is watching back my video from last year, it's kind of sweet, but I said that maybe when I get to 100 subscribers on YouTube, I'll buy the palette for myself, which is just, it's nice to see how much I've grown in the year and a half. But the palette I had said was the XL Pro, and I didn't end up getting that one. I ended up getting Carnival 3 Love Tahiti, and I'm not 100% sure why I ended up changing my mind. So yeah, I ended up completely skipping out on the XL Pro and I got Love Tahiti instead. I do like the Tahiti palette. I did use it in my October Get Ready With Me video, so there is a video that went up fairly recently of me using it. It's not my favourite palette in the world, but I am slowly starting to like it a bit more. I also had the Rude Cosmetics Roaring 20s palette on my list last year. I picked that one up. Again, I really like it. Rude Cosmetics is a brand I actually really like. I rate them quite highly. They've always got good pigment, good formula. They can be a bit expensive. I feel like if you're in America, they're a lot cheaper than they are here in the UK. I have done 2 testing videos on Rude Cosmetics now and they both went really well. So yeah, I absolutely love Rude Cosmetics. They're a brand I really rate quite highly. Then another palette that I bought, and realistically I'm just going to talk about the whole brand, is Lois Cosmetics, because I'm pretty sure I now own every palette that she has created. All of them were on the list last year, and she has 4. She has the Rose Metals, the Gone Rogue, Meet Me in the Underworld and Meet Me at Midnight. At the time last year she didn't have Meet Me at Midnight, and she did still have Rose Metals. Rose Metals has now been discontinued, but I do have it. And then yeah, she has since then released the Meet Me at Midnight palette. I have all 4 of them. I love them all. I'm very excited to see what Lois sort of comes out with next. that's my pinky purple eye done. I will just quickly tell you what shades I used in case you're interested. I used Grandmaster, Fun and Games, Rule Breaker, Champion. I then went in with Let's Play to deepen it up. The shimmers I used were Strategy, a little bit of Boss It Up, and a little bit of Elevate on the inner corner. Now, we move on to this side. The mirror did come cracked, but I don't really care. And the final palette that was on my list last year, which I picked up, and I actually picked up really recently, I haven't used it yet, but it was the Made by Mitchell Head in the Clouds palette. I saw it on TikTok Shop. I think it was for £20, and when you think it's normally on like Beauty Bay for 39, 40-ish pounds, I nabbed it, and I am so happy. I'm so excited to do a video with it because it is a palette that I've wanted since he released it. I saw people using it, I was like, I need it in my life. I will say the layout of the shades isn't my favourite, but I can still see like quite a few looks that I personally would love to do with the palette. So yeah, that's my most recent, I don't know if it's actually my most recent purchase, but it's the most recent one from last year's wish list. So now let's talk about what palettes I have my eye on at the moment. And we're going to start with Beauty Bay because, in case you didn't know, I love Beauty Bay. Beauty Bay has my heart, I think more than any other brand at the moment. So one of the ones that is on my list is the Berries £42 palette, and I know that sounds insane because I actually have the £16 palette. And this is something I actually don't agree with on Beauty Bay's side. I don't really see why they did it this way. Well, I do. I do see why they did it this way. Money is the reason, but I don't know why they released the Berries, the Midnight palette and the Earthy palette, but for Earthy and Midnight they had a £42 version, a £16 version and a £9 version. But then for Berries they didn't have the £42, they only had the 9 and the 16. And I understand it from a marketing point of view because a lot of people are going to be in the same position I'm in, where they bought the £42 Earthy, the £42 Midnight and then the £16 Berries. And now the £42 Berries has come out, I really want the £42 Berries because then I'll have a complete set. But then I've got two Berries palettes and I'm probably not going to use one of them. You know, it's a tricky one, but I think I do want it just to complete the set. And then another Beauty Bay palette, which again is another big Beauty Bay palette, is the Brights 2.0. And I'm not going to lie, I was going to press buy on that pretty instantly, if I'm being honest with myself. But I just sort of looked at it, and I also saw Missa do a video on it. And she sort of said a few, not negative things about the formula, but about like the colour scheme and things like that. And I sort of understood where she was coming from. And I sort of have convinced myself a little bit that I don't need it. But I do still want it. And I probably will still pick it up. If I see it on sale sort of thing, I probably will pick it up because that's just who I am as a person. Then had a look at BH Cosmetics because I had a few palettes on their list, on my list last year. I'm pretty sure I limited myself to 3 and I've done the same this year. 2 of them are the same, so the Trendy in Tokyo palette, it's a rainbow palette. I love rainbow palettes. I said this last year. I'm sorry if it's repetitive, but this palette, I've wanted it for so long. I just want it in my life, and I don't know why I don't just buy it because BH Cosmetics isn't expensive and it is on Beauty Bay. The next one I have on my list is the Mimosa palette, which again was on my list last year and I haven't picked it up yet. But the colour scheme, I just like the look of it. It just looks nice. I tend to go for pinks and golds and yellows and things like that quite often in my everyday life. And I do have the Summer in Saint-Tropez palette. So that's where this sort of affinity with these palettes has come from. The food ones and the location ones, I just kind of want them all because the formulas are really good. They are pigmented mattes, the shimmers, a bit like the Lois Cosmetics Meet Me in the Underworld palette, some of the best shimmers in my collection and I absolutely love them. So those two are still on here from last year. The one I've added is the Party in Puerto Rico, and I will say it does look quite similar to the Mimosa, so can anybody let me know in the comments if they are similar or if they're completely different. I feel like the Puerto Rico one is a bit more red and the Mimosa one is a bit more pink, if that makes a difference. Then I had a look at LA Girl. Now LA Girl is a brand I really want to do a testing video for, because A, I've heard they're inexpensive, B, I've heard they're pretty good quality, and I just love doing testing videos. And so when I was looking at their Beauty Bay page, I saw two eyeshadow palettes. They're both, I think they're both from the Desert Dream collection, I'm not sure. But the first one is the Main Stage palette and the other one is the VIP palette. Now I can't remember which one is which, but I know one is sort of pinks and yellows and one is sort of blues and greens. I like the look of both of them, and I've seen like swatches and they look really good. So I think if I do ever do a testing video for them, which I think I will, because can you get them in Boots, I think, here in the UK? And obviously on Beauty Bay, which is great. So I will do a testing video on them. I might pick up both the palettes because I'm pretty sure they're quite inexpensive, like they're less than £20 each. Why not give them a go? Then I actually looked at Melt Cosmetics. Now Melt, to me, is an expensive brand. I love makeup, don't get me wrong, but I also don't love spending loads of money on it. But weirdly, if you asked me to spend £100 in Boots, I'd probably get it done very easily. But the idea of spending like 70 quid on one palette just hurts my soul and I can't do it. And I will say, Melt interests me because I've heard a lot of good and bad reviews of them. But, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong because it is Spanish, I think, but the Amor Mariposas pressed pigment palette, that was 100% pronounced wrong, but it looks stunning. I like their smaller palettes, but from what I've heard, I know they can be used on their own because they are their own palettes, but apparently they sort of have like a pairing, so two palettes will work really well together, and I don't know if I would love that. Now a bit of a rogue one, and it is the Physicians Formula Rosé All Day Bouquet palette. And as much as I said I'm not putting palettes on here just because I want to test them, I kind of do just want to test this palette a little bit. I really want to do a testing Physicians Formula video, end of, because I know so many people love their butter bronzers and I really want to test them. But again, here in the UK, it's a bit more expensive than I think if you were to buy Physicians Formula in America, which is fine because they're obviously not a British brand, so everything has to be shipped over here and all of that. But I do really want to test them. My friend has the butter bronzer and she loves it, so that is another thing telling me I need to do it. And this is probably the palette that calls to me the most. It's got those pink shades, it's got sort of mauvey shades. And then I went on to the Revolution website. Now, Revolution is in a lot of hot water pretty much all the time at this point, which obviously I like to take a step back from that sort of thing. I don't want this channel to be a drama channel or anything like that. I'm not going to say much about it. But I'm also very aware that I maybe shouldn't promote brands that are doing such questionable things. But they do still put out some good products. I will say, I find Revolution kind of hit or miss. I know some people really love them, some people really hate them. I sit in between. Patricia Bright's Rich in Life palette. This was on my list last year. I probably will end up picking it up at some point. Also, I have heard it has pressed glitters in it, and I don't love pressed glitters, but I think I'd get over it. But yeah, I really want that palette, but it's never on sale. Then I've also put on here the XX Revolution Extravaganza palette. This was also on my list last year. It's a big palette, I just want it in my life, but I haven't picked it up yet because XX Revolution is, again, a touch more expensive than some of the other Revolution brands. And again, I've seen Missa do a video on it. I'm pretty sure she quite liked it. So In case you didn't know, Missa has a massive sway on my opinions because I just assume that if she likes things, I probably will too. Then one from I Heart Revolution is the Black Pearl Mini Chocolate Bar Palette. I have the Mini Chocolate Orange. I don't use it loads, but I do think they're really nice palettes because they are condensed, they're small, they have a well thought out colour scheme, and I think the Black Pearl is a really nice one. I don't have a lot of these sort of black, grey, cool tone sort of shades in my collection, so something like this would work really nicely for me. I then also have from XX Revolution the X-Ray palette. I don't have pictures in front of me, so I actually can't remember what this one looks like, but there will be a picture on screen, hopefully. Editing Effie has done that for us. But yeah, this is another palette that I saw and just put on the list because I probably quite liked it, even though I now can't remember what it looks like, but I'm sure it looks lovely. And then the final Revolution palette is actually Revolution and is the Hot Shot Passion Fire palette. I saw this collection come out, and you know what? I usually don't care about Revolution product drops, a bit like Colourpop. They just release too much and I get bored and I just end up not caring about what they're releasing. But this palette, and they had like a whole, I don't know, fruity kombucha thing going on with the collection, and I actually quite like this palette. So yeah, that's probably the only Revolution palette I would pick up. I have said before that I want to test all the Revolution brands, and I still do, but I don't know if I want to really be giving my money to them at the moment, so we'll see. I then went to the complete opposite end of the spectrum and went to Cult Beauty and had a look at Huda Beauty, because that makes sense. And I did put a few of her palettes down, and again, this is a sign that my opinion from last year has changed. I said last year that none of her big palettes really interested me. At that time, I didn't have the Mercury Retrograde palette. I don't think I do now, and I really like that palette. I actually think it's a really good quality palette, and I use it fairly often. Again, for my standards, fairly often means like twice in a year. But I've put on here the Toffee Obsession because I just think that looks like a really good everyday palette for me. Those are the sorts of browns I tend to go for and that I want on my face, and it just looks really nice. I'm pretty sure her £9 palettes are like, they used to be £25, I think they're £29 now. So it's not horrendous. I still can't spend that much on 9 shades. I then also put down her Empowered palette, which as I'm filming this is very, very new. Like, I didn't even know it had really come out. I hadn't seen a lot about it, but it looks really nice. I put it on the list. I want to have it in my life. I just think it looks quite nice in my opinion. And then I've also put down the Naughty palette, which I'll be honest, the shade that everyone hates throws me off a lot with this palette. I don't want it in there and it would just get ruined and look terrible, and I don't want that. But the rest of the palette I do really like the look of, so I feel like I would deal with it for that. And like I said, I have the Mercury Retrograde. I do quite like Huda's formula. I think it is really nice. I think it wears well, it looks well. Looks good. Then we move on to Colourpop. Now, I did my first ever Colourpop order this year, and I'm pretty sure I picked up a palette that wasn't even on my list. I picked up the High Tide palette and I love it. It is a monochromatic palette, so I don't use it that often because I don't always want blue eyeshadow. But it is a really good palette. I do really like it, and I do want to pick up more from Colourpop. So the first one I have on here is Orchid You Not, because I just like the colour scheme. I actually think that these little almost monochromatic but not quite palettes from Colourpop look really, really nice. And if you like the colour scheme, I would say go for it. I will say sometimes they like to hide little pressed glitter shades in their palettes. I don't like pressed glitter, so I try and avoid them. I don't know if these palettes that I'm mentioning have pressed glitter shades, or if they do, I've probably just decided that it wouldn't bother me that much. I also wrote down the Sweet Talk palette. Again, I don't have pictures in front of me, so I don't actually know what that one looks like, but I imagine it looks very pretty. I hope you enjoyed the picture I found of it. I've also put down the Just My Look palette because it's green. I can guess that from the name. But it is green. It looks really nice. There are a couple of green palettes on there. And I just think that this one is probably the one I'd get the most use out of, in my opinion. But also I just love green eyeshadow. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll know how often I put up green eyeshadow looks. I've also put down the That's Taupe palette, which may seem like a bit of a rogue choice for me, and it kind of is because it's a neutral palette. I do occasionally like a neutral palette. Now we move on to one which is a bit funny because it's written on here, I've already bought them. So I found, my brows do not match. So I was watching Missa, as always, and she, I don't know if she was sent or if she bought the two palettes by Cosmic Brushes. There's the Serenity palette and the Royal Rose. I think she was sent them, but she spoke about them and I immediately had to go check them out on Instagram. Now, the Serenity palette is sort of this, I don't know how to describe it, it's like purpley, blue, green, cool toned, ethereal, sort of really stunning palette that is in and out of stock all the time. I know that Cosmic Brushes is a women of colour owned British brand, so we love supporting that, and I think they're technically an indie brand, but they have like nearly 200,000 followers on Instagram, which is amazing. But I'm surprised people like Beauty Bay or Boots haven't like scooped them up yet. But yeah, I went on their Instagram, checked out their website, the Serenity palette was out of stock, and I thought I might as well buy them both together than doing two orders. So I waited and waited and waited and waited, and then they finally did a restock, and I ordered them last week as I'm filming this. So they should be here soon, to be honest, hopefully. But yeah, they were on the list because I planned this video a while ago. But now, let's do our thoughts on the palette. Oh yeah, I have a plaster on my thumb because my nail is going to rip off at any point and it's going to hurt, so I'm trying to prevent it. But let's chat about the palette. So we start with the pink side. So again, I did say I used Let's Play, Grandmaster, Fun and Games, Rule Breaker, Champion, Strategy, Boss It Up and Elevate. I think those are all the shades that I used on this side of my face. I'm not in focus. There we go. I really like it. I will say they didn't go on perfectly. Like the first shade which I started with was Grandmaster, this one here, this purple. And it sort of just didn't go on as pigmented as I was expecting to. It took a lot of building up, it was a little bit patchy. Same with the pink I used after it, Fun and Games. It wasn't my favourite. But now that I've done all the blending, I think it looks a lot better. It looks like a standard eye look. It looks really nice. The shimmers, the shimmers. So I really quite like Boss It Up. That went on super pigmented. I've just sort of used it to blend the pink and the purple. That went on super pigmented. Strategy kind of went on a bit like a topper shade. Same with Elevate. They kind of just went on like topper shades, which is good to know. I actually really like topper shades. It's just not what I was expecting and it's not what I was going for with this look, but that's fine. Now we move on to the sunsetty side, and I'll try and remember all the shades I used. I used Opposition, My Turn, Can't Cope, Risk Taker, Piece of Me. I used a little bit of Kingslayer to blend out the yellow. And then in terms of shimmers, I used Pursuit, a little bit of Surrender and a little bit of Victory. Again, Pursuit, topper shade. It's not got the base behind it that I would like. And I would say the same about Surrender. It didn't really give me a lot at all. Victory has a green tint to it, so I'm in love with that already. I think the mattes on this side worked a little bit better. I think my favourite one is Risk Taker. That worked really nicely. Again, the red didn't go on as pigmented as I would have liked, but that's fine. I quite like the mattes a bit more on this side. Overall, I like the looks that I've got, and the shades did work well enough. I was just expecting them to be better, because as much as I bought this for barely anything on TikTok Shop, if you bought it outright, it's quite expensive. So yeah. Overall, I'm not disappointed with the palette. It's not put me off buying more from PLOUISE in the future. But there we go. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. If you like my content, please consider subscribing. I usually put up 2 videos a week and it's all makeup content. So if that sounds like the type of thing, then this is a place for you. We are coming to the end of palette week. We only have one day left, but there will be a Saturday video going up as always, and that'll just be a standard makeup video. Let me know down in the comment section which palettes are on your wish list at the moment. Let me know if there's any that should be on mine. Let me know if there's any that are on mine that I shouldn't buy, because that's always good to know as well. But other than that, I will let you go. Have a great day and an amazing week, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.